On a dusty road under a fading sun, two men pulled up behind her, their laughter echoing louder than the silence that surrounded them. She stood still, backlit by the last amber light of day, her breath calm though her heart raced. They moved, closer, grinning like they already knew how this story ended. But stories don't end just because someone thinks they've written the final line. Without warning, the air changed, thickened. A low, primal growl cut through the wind like truth. Through denial, they froze. The road had seemed empty, but something had been watching, something ancient, protective, waiting. Why was she walking alone? Who or what was behind her now? Tell us where you're watching from, because this isn't just a story of survival. It's a story of legacy, justice, and something they never saw coming. Lena Taylor was 19, soft-spoken, and often overlooked in a town where silence was easier than survival. Raised in a place where her skin was seen before her name, she had learned early that strength didn't always speak. It watched, waited, and endured. She loved animals, especially the ones others feared or ignored, and her heart still beat, in rhythm with the stories her grandmother once whispered beneath the stars. Today, Lena walked a long, sun-baked stretch of desert road, her grandmother's silver pendant warm against her chest, an heirloom said to protect the women in their bloodline. She was headed toward sacred ground, a small, unmarked memorial near, the edge of tribal land where generations before her had buried more than just their dead. They had buried their silence. The town of Ridgewater, tucked between stretches of heat and history, hadn't changed. Doug and Ryan hadn't either. Men in their 30s who wore their cruelty like a badge, always on the lookout for someone to remind of their place. They recognized Lena the moment they saw her walking alone, the hem of her shirt catching. Desert wind, her hair braided like her grandmother taught her. They slowed their car beside her, grinning from behind cracked windows. To them, she was just a girl with no backup, no voice, and no reason to believe she'd make it past sundown unbothered. But they didn't know where she was going. They didn't know who she was. The road was long, but Lena had walked harder. Paths in silence. And the desert, that brutal, unforgiving land, doesn't lie. It exposes. There was no safety in cars, no comfort in the smile of a stranger. Only truth. And Lena, with her bare hands and quiet fire, was about to show them exactly what that meant. The sun hung low as Lena stepped out of her old, dust-covered car, the wind carrying the desert's dry breath across her skin. The memorial wasn't marked by much, just a worn stone and a small circle of wildflowers that somehow bloomed in defiance of the heat. She walked slowly, deliberately, clutching the small pouch around her neck, the one her grandmother had given her before passing. Behind her, tires crunched against gravel. She didn't turn. Doug and Ryan pulled up like they owned the land, their old pickup coughing to a stop just feet from where Lena stood. At first, they smiled. "Hey there, sweetheart," Doug said, stepping out. "Need a ride? Ain't safe out here all alone." Lena didn't answer. She kept her eyes on the flowers, bending slightly to brush dust off the stone. "We're just being nice," Ryan added, his voice dripping with false charm. "Or maybe you're too good to talk to folks like us." When Lena turned, her eyes were calm but unreadable. "I'm fine," she said softly. "Please leave." Doug's smile twitched. "We were raised to help women in need," he said, stepping closer. "But you don't even say thank you?" Then the laughter. Low, mean. "Pretty braids. Ryan sneered. "How long they'd take? Or did your kind just come with them?" The air turned colder. Lena stood her ground. When they grabbed her by the arms, she didn't scream. She didn't fight. Not yet. Instead, she closed her eyes and whispered a word, low, ancient, rooted in something older than this land. Her grandmother's word, the one she was told only to say if her soul felt. Cornered, and then it happened. The wind changed. It didn't whip or roar. It simply shifted, as if the earth itself had paused to listen. Doug's hand tightened on her wrist until a low growl rolled across the open land. It was deep, primal, real. Ryan faltered, turning quickly. "What the hell was that?" Doug didn't answer. He was staring over Lena's shoulder now, his face drained of color. His voice, for the first time, shook. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. Behind her, something moved through the sand, and it wasn't done watching. A silence deeper than any before settled across the dirt road. Dust hung in the golden light as Doug and Ryan froze in place, eyes locked on the creature now standing between them and the car. It wasn't rushing, wasn't roaring. It stood still, low and powerful, its amber eyes fixed and unblinking. A mountain lion, full-grown, its body a quiet promise of violence. It didn't snarl, it didn't need to. The mere weight of its presence made the desert itself seem to lean in. Doug's grip loosened from Lena's arm. Ryan took a step back, stumbling slightly in the sand. "Jesus," he whispered, "we need to get out of here." But Doug, pride thick in his throat, tried to stand his ground. "It's just an animal," he muttered, trying to convince himself more than anyone else. "Yell at it, scare it off." He took one step forward. The lion's muscles twitched. Its growl this time was no whisper. It thundered from its chest like the echo of thunder rolling down the hills. Ryan yelped, jumping back and nearly falling. "Doug, stop, stop!" But it wasn't the lion that made them freeze again. It was Lena. She stepped forward slowly, her feet firm in the dirt, her shoulders relaxed. She didn't scream, didn't cry. Her hand went to her necklace, the one with the silver charm shaped like a claw, a family symbol passed down through generations. The lion didn't move, didn't blink. It just watched her, like it had been waiting. She was no longer the hunted. She was the storm the desert had waited for. Doug's voice cracked. "Call it off," he yelled, his face red with rage and rising fear. Lena's eyes didn't leave his. "I never called it," she said softly. "It came, because I don't run anymore." Her voice rang with a quiet thunder, ancient and rooted. In that moment, Doug and Ryan finally felt the cold weight of fear they'd so often handed out. Not the fear of being chased, but the fear of being seen. Truly seen. Stripped of power, held accountable. The lion took a slow step forward. Not charging, not attacking. Just reminding. Doug turned and ran first, stumbling back into the car. Ryan followed, his face pale. The engine roared to life, tires skidding as they reversed down the dirt road, leaving a trail of dust and cowardice behind them. Lena stood still, her hand still on the necklace, the wind brushing against her braids. The lion turned its head slightly, meeting her eyes. Then, without a sound, it padded away into the desert brush, fading as silently as it had arrived, like it had never existed, like it had only come when called by blood, by history, by a whisper passed from mother to daughter. And Lena, she didn't flinch, didn't run. She just stood in the silence, more powerful than ever, the sun now rising behind her. In the days that followed, Lena sat quietly in her bedroom, her fingers gently tracing the ridges of the silver pendant that still hung around her neck. The world outside had changed, but inside her something deeper had shifted. Memories of her grandmother began to rise, not just as echoes, but as answers. The old stories came back in full color, tales of the spirit whisperer, the woman known in their tribe, not just for her wisdom, but for her sacred bond with the land. Her grandmother didn't teach Lena to fear nature. She taught her to listen, to honor it, to walk with it, not above it. You don't summon spirits, she used, to say you welcome them when they arrive. Lena had never truly understood what that meant. Not until the desert stood still and something ancient stepped between her and danger. For years, she had felt something watching whenever she wore the necklace. Not threatening, just present. Like the wind had a voice and the dirt remembered. Her footsteps. Now she knew. That presence had a name. It had always been love. But there was more. Unbeknownst to Doug and Ryan, Lena had clipped a small camera to her bag that day. A habit born of caution, one her grandmother insisted upon after an earlier incident. The footage captured everything. Every slur, every threat, every inch of their entitlement. And it wasn't the first time. As Lena reviewed the files, she discovered moments when other women, other girls had been cornered in quieter places, with no one to save them. She handed the footage over to investigators. Within a week, both men were arrested. Charges were filed not only for their attack on Lena, but for multiple open complaints that had mysteriously gone unverified for years. The evidence was undeniable now. A local officer, shaken by the footage, met with Lena at the station. He looked at her for a long time before finally saying, "That animal saved your life." Lena looked up, her eyes soft but certain. "No," she said. "My grandmother did. She just never left." Outside, the wind stirred again, and in that moment, the desert whispered back. The lion didn't come to punish. It came to remind the world. Every soul has a guardian. Justice didn't arrive in sirens or headlines. It came in the steady, relentless form of truth. After Lena's footage was submitted to investigators, it didn't take long for the system to catch up with the cruelty it had once ignored. Doug and Ryan, long shielded by a town that tolerated them, were arrested and exposed across local and national media. Their charges weren't just for the attack on Lena, but for a series of racially charged incidents that had quietly piled up over the years, silenced complaints, dismissed testimonies, brushed aside voices. But not anymore. Lena's story had changed the air. It had become too loud, too clear, and too necessary to be denied. What started as a single act of hatred had sparked something far greater. Lena's calm defiance, her presence in the face of fear, became a lightning rod for conversation and change. Tribal elders from nearby communities began to speak publicly, some breaking decades of quiet tension. They remembered Lena's grandmother. Many had known her as the Spirit Whisperer, a woman whose connection to nature wasn't myth, it was memory. The story of the mountain lion spread like an old tale finally reborn, not as folklore, but as living, breathing testimony. She was never alone, an elder said during a community circle. The land remembers who walks with care. It protects its own. Lena didn't seek the spotlight, but she accepted the responsibility it brought. With the encouragement of community leaders and her own quiet fire, she launched a program called Spirit Watch, a wildlife education and cultural connection initiative focused on young girls, especially girls of color, who, like her, had spent their lives being told they were too soft to be strong, too different to belong. The program taught about animals and ecology, yes, but it also taught legacy, intuition, and the power of stillness. Lena led her first sessions under open skies, her voice steady, her hands holding pieces of nature like they were sacred books. The girls listened, they watched, and slowly they began to walk taller. She taught them not to fear the wilderness, but to respect it, not to conquer nature, but to move within it. And in doing so, Lena reminded them of something vital, that strength wasn't about volume or violence, it was about presence. It was about knowing who you are when no one else seems to see you. A month after the incident, Lena returned to the same desert trail, not out of obligation, but ceremony. This time, she didn't walk alone. With her were 12 girls, each wearing a small pendant modeled after her grandmother's necklace, handmade, blessed in tradition, and glimmering with quiet power. They stopped near the unmarked memorial, where Lena had once stood cornered. The desert, now blooming in early spring, greeted them with wildflowers and wind. The sky stretched endlessly above them, the same but different. Lena stepped forward, kneeling in the sand. Her fingers grazed the earth like a prayer. She whispered something only the wind could hear. Behind her, the girls sat in a circle, silent and waiting. And then, from the canyon beyond, a sound, a distant, echoing roar. Not angry, not violent, just known. One girl gasped. Was that real? Lena turned, smiling. It's always real, she said. It's just not always loud. She didn't speak of revenge. She didn't need to. The roar had said enough. Later that week, she appeared in a nationally televised interview. The host leaned in gently and asked, "How did you manage to stay so calm in the face of such hate?" Lena took a moment before answering. Then she looked directly into the camera, her voice as soft as it had been in the desert. But now it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken stories. "I didn't fight back with fists," she said. "I stood still. I let my truth walk beside me. And it turns out that was enough." Her words traveled across living rooms, classrooms, reservations, and beyond. Her image, braided hair, strong shoulders, and unwavering eyes became a symbol, not of pain, but of transformation. And the desert remembered too. In a quiet shot captured by a local journalist, Lena is seen days later walking alone again, this time at dusk. She stands at the edge of the canyon, her shadow long behind her, and the land before her glowing with the last kiss of light. There's no fear in her stance, only grace, only knowing, because she didn't run from the desert. She rose inside it. They thought she was prey, just a quiet girl on a lonely road, easy to corner, easier to forget. But what they didn't see, what they never even considered, was the bloodline of warriors she carried in silence. The kind of strength that doesn't need to shout. The kind of protection that rises from the dust itself when you stand your ground with truth in your chest. Lena didn't have to fight with fists. She stood still, and the world shifted around her. Her story wasn't about revenge. It was about remembrance, about what happens when legacy, spirit, and justice walk together. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you look? Would your ancestors be proud of the way you stand today? If this story made your heart race, share it, because the loudest victories sometimes come from the quietest strength, and those stories deserve to be heard. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one, where courage walks softly and roars when needed.